So, all you amazing people out there, we are going to nerd out a little bit about the good open source, because I want to kind of draw in a point and explain something to you guys and girls and whatnot out there about open source, because you see a lot of misconception, misinformation, bending the truth, people selling you something that open source is not. And we can all agree that there are probably millions, if not close to 1 billion people using open source in general. There are give me a second here. There are about, if we do roughly calculations about how many computers there are in the world and how many. So as I was saying, it's a cloudy day and I have windows in my lighting is a fucking issue in Denmark. Okay. Anyway, if we do like a really roughly calculation about how many users of computers there are and how many that are Linux desktop users and blah 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 blah. This is not a specific Linux video, this is more a development video, open source video, but we kind of have to talk about this Linux thing, sadly enough. There is about, roughly speaking, let's say 2 million Linux users. 2 million, remember those numbers. And you hear a lot of open source advocate, the Free Software Foundation, Linux users, open source developers say that open source is great because you can look at the source code. And I will agree 1 million times with that. Open source's biggest strength is that I, as a layman, can look at this over here and I can learn from it, I can contribute to it as a part-time developer, as I probably will be called right now in this day and age with the job that I have and stuff like that. However, this is where the reality stick is going to slap you in the face a little bit. It only matters if you understand this here. If you don't know what this is, if you cannot read this, if you have no concept what this is, being able to see it means nothing to you. Nada. I'm sorry to say it. If you don't know what this is, looking at it till your dick falls off don't matter. Not at all. I'm sorry to say it. It don't matter. That's to the extent open source matter. It's an amazing learning tool if you're going to learn coding. I have learned 90% of my Python knowledge is coming from looking at other people's code. 90% of my C# knowledge is coming from looking at other people's code and how they're doing it. But I kind of also know how this works and what this is. This is C++ and C. I don't know C++ and C, but I can see integers, I can see for loops, I can see while, else if statements, I can see functions, I can see variables, and so on and so on. If you can't see just the basics of that, this means nothing for you. And we could go on and on and on. That's why I always been a big component of open source is amazing for developers. It's amazing for hobbyists. It's amazing for people that just can read 2% of this here. Because if you understand 2% of this up here, there's a big chance that just by reading this and learning, some tutorials and stuff like that, you will start to learn and understand 4%, 5%, 15%, 20%. And then over a certain amount of time, you understand everything of this. Why are there brackets here, and why is there asterisks there, and what does this mean, and you will start to understand this. So here's the kicker. You can actually see this up here. Kernel. We're actually looking at the implementation of file systems in the Linux kernel right now. This is how it looks like in code. So if you're not a developer and you don't have intimate knowledge about what we are looking at, even developers probably didn't know we were looking at some file system stuff. Some may not. It's a little bit talked in here. There was this could probably give it away a little bit. Oh, it's actually here, file system is actually saying it here. You get my idea here. If you don't understand all this, okay, we now know that it's a file system, but why is it doing this? Why is it doing this? That's something developers or up-and-coming developers only understand. I hope I've drawn in my point. Open source, no matter where it's being used, is only beneficial for developers, hobby coders, and here's the thing, most of the people that are working on open source are developers and hobby coders. That means that they have development backgrounds, but they're doing it at home and not being paid for it. They're doing it in spare time. Why am I saying this? And this is where we are going to go into the Linux realm a little bit, which I hate because it comes with it a lot of crazy ass people that have no idea what they're talking about, but we're going to do it anyway. This here is the GitHub page of the kernel, the Linux kernel. And like I said before, we probably have about 2 million people using the good old Linux. Been using it since 95, 96, and I'm still using it to this day. I've been looking at open source code since that day, okay? There are millions of users of Linux, but how many contributors are there actually to the kernel? About 15,000. Even if that was a million people only using Linux, only having 15,000 helping out with the code. Not many. And most of those 15,000 are probably are developers, either paid or hobby or doing it, in their spare time. You say, Kent, you stupid idiot, this is just the kernel. Well, let's look at GNOME. You need to be a member to help out with the GNOME project. Not even 300 people. And most of them are probably developers or have a development background. It's not little sweet Bob or little sweet Amy in their basements. This is GIMP. One of the most used open source projects in the world, both on Windows, Mac, and Linux. 309 members. That don't mean that you can't contribute to it, as far as I understand with it. They do take outside contribution, but let's say there's 1,000 of those. You can see here there's 50,000 commits to GIMP in it. I think this is its lifetime. I'm not sure about this, but again, even if this was just like in a month, it's nothing when you think about that there are probably millions of people using GIMP. Millions. But we only get like 50-something thousand commits. And it's not most of them, most people, they do more than one commit. It's not just one commit per person. We all love to talk about this security stuff and whatnot. CVE details, just the first site I found. Who is finding most of the issues with Linux and software in general, both proprietary and open source? It's either developers themselves or organizations that earn their money by finding security issues with software, kind of blackmailing to some degree the company, is saying, hey, you have an issue here. If you don't fix it within this time span, we are going to publicize this vulnerability to the world. And then, of course, pay us. So why am I showing this and why am I using Linux? It's just an example for open source because Linux is uncategorically the biggest open source project in the world. Like the single biggest open source project in the world. And it has 15,000 contributors that are associated with GitHub. If we are going to believe that other people that are not developers would go and help out with the code, this should be way higher. Way higher. Way higher. It should be like, as the saying is, the more open source users, the more eyes on the code. So if there is, let's just say 2 million Linux users, and if you're following the narrative of the propaganda of open source, or what you would call it, or the spiel of open source, that there should be at least over 100 million contributors. There should be at least over 150 million contributors. What I'm trying to say here, peeps, is that I'm not trying to rag on open source. I'm not trying to say open source is bad. I'm not trying to say that proprietary software is better. What I am trying to say is that this here, open source, this thing here, is really important, really great, really beneficial, really amazing for developers. If you are not a developer, if you have no concept of this, it's not going to help. It's not. The closest this is going to help you that don't understand this is that you potentially are getting a lot of free shit, because open source software in general tend to not cost money. It's the support they make money on. So as an end user, one of the biggest benefits for open source software for you that have no concept of this up here is that you're getting a lot of amazing, great tools for this. It has no impact on your life other than that. It's not going to help you in any way, shape, or form, in any social situations, any societal situations, or anything like that. This here is not going to change the political landscape of your local tax bracket that you are in your local council, or help you out with getting governments to spend less money on software. Because if they're not spending it on a Windows license, they're spending it other places. I've worked in governments. I know how they're spending their money. And if they don't use it one place, they're using it in another place within the same department. Because a lot of times they just get a set amount of money that they have to deal with. And if 1 year you use less money than that, they're cutting the budget. Because, well, last year you only used 10,000 instead of 20,000. That means you can run the department on 10,000, roughly speaking here. And some countries do it a little bit different, but this is like the overall arc of how funding kind of looks like for government. institute. If you can do it for less, and you've shown you can do it for less, this is how we do it. And I've not just worked with one government agency, I've worked with a few of them, and they all work that way. So at the end of the year, if you have to spend a shit ton of money, if you have money left in the bank, basically. But anyway, this here is going to benefit me. This is going to help me and the company I work for. It's not going to help you, other than you are getting potentially amazingly built free tools that a lot of developers have their hands in. And you can go and yell and scream to those developers if there is an issue, and they will probably fix it. But I have seen plenty of closed source software where people went and yelled and screamed at them, and they then got fixed. The problems got fixed. And another misconception is that your proprietary software, let's say Microsoft proprietary software, it's only Microsoft people that are going to look at the source code. That's a lie. Nvidia, AMD, name the big IBM, they all have more than likely looked at Microsoft source code. Like almost 100,000% guaranteed. The only issue here is that they cannot use it unless Microsoft say that they're allowed to. Why do they need to look at it? To make better drivers, and so on and so on. What they then do is they sign an NDA, say that they cannot use this knowledge to compete with Microsoft, and they will not share this knowledge with anyone else, and yada 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 yada. You get what I'm coming at here? Just because it's proprietary, that don't mean that people can't see the source code. It just means that people cannot publicly see the source code. There are a lot of misconceptions about the benefits of open source, the negative about proprietary software in this world, that mostly are coming from people that have never written a line of code in their life, mostly. So I hope this will give you an idea about how important open source can be if you are learning, and how important open source can be for developers. The benefits of open source is tightly knit within a really, really specific group of people that account for a really, really small percentage of the human population, developers. That's where open source matters. That's the only place it matters. See you all later. Bye-bye.